while I'm up here today, I'm actually not going to be talking about Lippincott's work, per se, but I am going to be talking about something that has been very interesting to our firm and something that we've been exploring for the past couple of years, which is this whole idea of what is, sort of our relationship with brands, and how do we think about brands, and what role do they play in our lives, and what kind of power do we have over them or they have over us. So there's sort of three parts to this. The first part is we're just going to take a little spin back through history and just look at sort of some major shifts that we've seen in brands over the past couple millennium. And then we're going to move into actually sort of a little peek at the exhibit that we just did in New York, which just finished last week at the Condé Nast building, which was called Like Me, Our Bond with Brands. So you'll be able to get a sense of kind of how that was organized. And then lastly, we're going to just talk a little bit about some work we've been doing about thinking about the future. What are the kinds of tools that we think we need to be focused on in order to help our clients actually stay ahead on this, the sort of cutting edge of change as it's coming up upon us today. So today, now, this very moment, is the slowest pace of change you will ever experience for the rest of your life. I know for the past couple of days since I've been here, I've been hearing a lot about change, and I think we're all sort of like excited, but we're also sort of nervous about this, right? It's like, what is it going to mean to our jobs? That was so cool yesterday to see that there's a calligraphy machine that can actually do a Bible, like literally, right? So what happens to us as designers when literally we could feed things into a computer and it could educate itself to the point where it can actually design logos for us? And then what do we go do after that? But then there's the other side of it, which is just this huge excitement for what all of these possibilities and technology are going to bring us. And that, I think, is really the part that we want to focus on as we go through the presentation. Just to go back 100 years and just look at some of the progress we've made, literally 100 years ago, only 8% of us had telephones in our homes. And when I was showing this and sharing it with some of my friends the other day, they were like, yeah, and only 8% have them now, because everybody has moved to wireless, right? We had the great invention of the zipper 100 years ago. But today, if you fast forward 100 years, we have a Japanese robot that's learning human emotion. Literally, people are buying seats on the Virgin Galactic to go into outer space potentially as early as next year. Think about that. And this fact just really, frankly, blows my mind. Most babies today are going to live past 100. Think of that lifespan, and all the things that they're going to need to do to prepare for being able to live to 100 and support themselves, feed themselves, et cetera. So it's an exciting, exciting time when you look at that from that perspective. So as the world has changed, our idea of branding also is transforming. I think that, nature really invented branding, and we've learned a lot from that. The patterns and the colors of, nature as it exists today have given us all these kind of cues for things that have become, truly to have a lot of meaning for us as we, as designers, sort of think about how we create symbols in the world. But in the beginning, and we're just kind of go through history here, brands were mostly static and permanent. Like way back in 79 AD, ancient bread from the ruins of Pompeii were marked to indicate their bakery of origin. So you could see my mark versus Debbie's bread, and you could decide which one you wanted to buy. Flipping all the way up to 1804, we see Napoleon being very creative. He's a short guy, right? And he wanted to stand out. So he decided that he would turn his hat sideways so that he could be, seen in a crowd. Then you move all the way up to 1950, and we have the iconic NBC chimes. These were some of the first audio branding symbols, if you will, that we've had. And we still have those today, even though the logo has changed completely. As we move into the next century, basically into the 1990s, we see a really pretty big shift happening, mostly from technology and the advance of technology. Things become more transparent. We start to have more of a dialogue with brands. Brands are starting to have to open themselves up and participate in that dialogue with us. Google, for instance, began organizing human knowledge. I think that, they were learning from us, from every search, and that was, sort of a way for them to then be able to give us more things that, we might be interested in. It's crazy to me that people rent out rooms in their home to complete strangers, but Airbnb is trusting that entire community globally to be the face of their brand, which is a pretty awesome thing. The other thing that's important is we've actually had an impact on what brands are doing. So, SeaWorld really had to bend to public pressure and, sort of get rid of their iconic orca breeding program. These are really all examples of the, sort of time that we're in right now where community is so important and that two-way dialogue is so important to how brands are, working in the marketplace. And as we move forward, there's even a greater change happening, and it's an even scarier one in some regards because we have the introduction of AI, artificial intelligence, and even more technology that is allowing brands to actually become almost quasi-sentient life forms. We actually at Lippincott have been referring to these as brand beings. So, some of you may have, how many have an Amazon Alexa at home? Anybody here experimenting with that? Right, so that little box is just sitting there on your coffee table, and it's really studying you. It's listening to you, it's learning your behaviors, it's learning all about you. And I guess the question we have to ask, at what point is Alexa know more about us than we actually know about ourselves? I love this one. Magic Leap has developed a light beam that goes directly into your eye, and it allows you to actually, your eye to be tricked so that you're seeing what it wants you to see versus sort of what you would see if you weren't being tricked. If that were the case, honestly, it would be easy for me to be at home on my couch in my own comfortable home doing this talk and just beaming it to you guys, and you really wouldn't be able to know the difference. And I know there's an example in Oliver's presentation that's just going to blow your mind, an example of that. And then there's like this whole idea of ethics in branding. So Tesla's autopilot, right? It's got all these sensors, and it's allows you to drive up to 70 miles an hour on the freeway. You're not driving, the car is driving. And I guess the question is, what happens when two of these Teslas are going 70 miles an hour and they're coming straight at each other, and someone is going to have to make a decision about whose life is going to be left at the end of that? So thinking about the future and how we need to think about branding in the context of these things that are taking on more of a life of their own, I think is something that's really challenging and something that we all need to be thinking about as we move forward. So we wanted to explore these ideas, and so we put together this exhibit called Like Me, Our Bond with Brands, with a really kind of a future-forward component to it, sort of looking at what are these future trends that we need to be thinking about that will help our clients stay ahead and stay relevant in this world. So I have a little video clip, which comes next. So whether we like it or not, we all have relationships with brands, regardless of whether we feel grateful for their partnership or really resentful for their persuasion. There's really no escaping the fact that they're really an intimate part of our lives. In many ways, brands form our personal identity. But do brands shape us, or do we shape brands? So we looked at this, which we literally termed our subvert wall, where we just looked at what the power that we've had over brands and also the power that brands have over us and how that's impacted society really kind of over quite a long timeline. So two of the greatest examples in this are the fact that the image of Che Guevara actually used to be a symbol of real rebellion, right? I mean, this was literally a rebellion symbol, and now you can get that printed on pajamas. I mean, really, I guess that's for your rebellious child. But the other thing is Grumpy Cat, right? Grumpy Cat is making $50 million a year now. That's crazy, right? Grumpy Cat. I love Grumpy Cat. More than Leo DiCaprio makes per year, all right? So you never know, you never know. But we actually think Madonna summed it up with this quote, which I can read. If you don't like me and still watch everything I do, you're a fan. It spawned, yeah, just me. It spawned hundreds of articles, obviously thousands of retweets, and more than 100,000 likes. And I guess at the end of the day, it's really because it's true, right? We let these things become brands in their own way, like Grumpy Cat. When we had this, we were doing tours in the, taking people through this exhibit, we would ask people who they thought said this, and of course everybody thought it was a Kardashian. And we were like, yeah, the Kardashians, and they're like, yeah, those people, like, I don't know why they're so famous, and we're like, well, yeah, what do you do in the morning? Do you check out what the Kardashians just did yesterday? And everybody was like, yeah, I do. And you're like, well, we're giving them that power then, right? And I think that when we think about that in relationship to all the brands in our life, it's just an interesting time. The other thing we looked at was the value that we place on brands. And it was interesting, Debbie had that slide up before. So we put two identical Louis Vuitton bags in this little platform, and we had two stories. One story was about the woman who would only be able to accept the $1,000 real bag with the handcrafted leather and the beautiful stitching and just the craft. On the other side, there's a $60 bag that looks almost identical to the bag on the, well, I won't tell you which one's which. So we would ask people when they came in, which one do you think is real? And of course, some people, very observant people, could tell, but honestly, many people couldn't tell. So at the end of the day, I guess the question is, does it really make a difference? Or does it only make a difference to you? The last thing we did is we've really been looking at the future and thinking about, what are these trends that are going to impact us as we move forward and are working with our clients and helping them to think about how to actually maximize their brands in this, incredibly changing world. So we had these movie clips, we had 5 of them, and I'm just gonna read the 5 different trends that they represented to you. The first one was about an automated life, which is about instant, on-demand access to everything. We'll never need to remember to buy orange juice, Tropicana, of course. Our connected refrigerator will automatically do it for us, and they'll buy the brand we want to because they'll know. Our trust in machines. Smart devices will know us in unexpectedly intimate ways. They'll know when we're not sleeping well, cheating on our diet, or in a bad mood. A transparent world. Everything and everyone will be continually tracked and every moment shared. We're already experiencing this, right? We have skill scores, fitness scores, relationship scores. It's already happening. You can check your Uber score because they're tracking you as much as you're tracking them. The next trend is around this idea of especially for you. Everything will be customized for our individual needs, even the food we order in restaurants. So before you even get there, the chef will know your preferences. He'll be able to tailor the meal for you. You won't even have to ask. And then this idea of blended realities. The boundaries between real and virtual are really going to disappear. And that is going to create the opportunity for some real immersive experience that we may not be able to tell the difference, what's real and what isn't real. So we asked people to take a look at these movie clips and vote on the idea that they thought was most exciting and on the idea that they thought was most scary. So this is kind of how it progressed during the week. And you can see, or it was actually there for 3 weeks. You can see one of those trends has like a lot of like black balls in it. Which one do you think that is out of those trends that I just... Now, the trend that scared people the most was the trend around transparency. And this is a trend that we're already experiencing. And so it surprised us, actually, that this was the one that so frightened people. But it's the, it's the scare of having your data completely out there and, in the open for everyone. But it is really the backbone trend for every single one of the other trends. Without that trend, the other ones actually won't come to fruition and with as many possibilities as if we had the transparency. So as the world is speeding up, I guess the question is, what is it going to take to keep up? We ourselves are the upper curve, right? We're experiencing this change every single day. But many of us are working with companies that are on that kind of slower trajectory on the bottom, which is labeled the pace of a company. So we see it as kind of our responsibility as designers, and I nod to Debbie as well for what she was talking about earlier. It's our job to push our clients to get there, because otherwise, potentially their businesses are going to become obsolete. I mean, think about the story we heard yesterday with Kodak. I do hope that Kodak can get back on its feet and become, one of those iconic companies again for the future. But it's really important that we think about what are the things that we could be doing. I mean, think about IBM and IBM Watson. That's a perfect example of a company that is in constant state of change. And that constant state of change allowed them to build a brand around Watson that's, this whole idea of artificial intelligence that can do amazing things, just amazing things. There's a few other examples of the companies, older companies that are starting to break out with newer things. And interestingly, this is a huge opportunity for them to test new ideas and new areas and potentially create new brands. So we see that as a very positive thing. So the next bit is about sort of what are the tools that we're going to need in our toolkit in order to help our companies get there. First, we need extraordinary sensing. When you're driving faster, you need stronger headlights. This means asking really probing questions and being intensely curious about the world. Asking your clients, who is your customer of the future? How will they live their lives? What are the problems they may not know that they have now, but will potentially have in the future? We saw some big shifts on the radar before 2016, but I'm not sure we all saw them. I mean, who knew that Uber would be, testing self-driving cars this year? I mean, I was like, wow, already? That seems so fast. In banking, Vanguard's robo-advisor managed $30 billion in assets with just an algorithm. I mean, then you have to ask the question, if you're in financial services, what do you do, right? If the machine's going to do it all, what are the banks going to do? What's their new role? And in health, to the point I made earlier, IBM's Watson can diagnose lung cancer with 90% accuracy, beating the 50% accuracy of a doctor. That's nuts. It's wonderful. I mean, right? That's the positive side of what all this technology is going to bring us. And then obviously, the augmented reality game Pokemon Go, took over, and Nintendo sensed big things for augmented reality when they launched that game in July and looked at the results now in October. They've had an 88% increase in their stock price and a 91% increase in market cap. So these are really important. How can we be helping our clients think about how to actually engage with some of these new trends and technologies in order to create ways for them to exponentially grow. The next thing we need in our toolkit is this idea of having expansive, ambitious purpose. The size of the business is going to be proportional to the size of the problem you aim to solve. So this actually means thinking really big, right? Having a soaring human aspiration. Something functional just isn't going to get you there today. You know, Starbucks is all about a connected community. Tesla, their big idea is about creating, you know, this transition to a sustainable world. Google, who I absolutely love, is all about organizing information to make it universally acceptable and usable. And just like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, for those of you who are in the design community, this should have been something that rose to the top in your email box, but they worked with Monotype for the past 5 years, and they've literally been digitizing every human language on Earth. I think something like over 800. So all of those languages that we're losing, like yearly, are being preserved by Google and Monotype. And I think it was just an amazing, you know, ambitious project. And then on the side of personal well-being, this company 23andMe, they're going to be able to help us access and understand the benefit of the human genome. If you're willing to give them your DNA and find out, that's how we're going to actually be able to get to a place where we can cure cancer. And again, when you have a mighty purpose, it can be mighty powerful. I've seen a few of these slides over the past couple of days, but you know, those companies with bigger purposes have 151% you know, return versus the S&P 500 at 80. So it's powerful. The next thing you need to be thinking about is digital business design. Digital businesses actually scale really fast, right? But they run by, you know, slightly different rules. So those rules, though, allow us to, I think, unlock new value. We don't have to do all the content development ourselves anymore. Frankly, I'm kind of a slow technology person. I just learned Instagram. I probably shouldn't let you all know that, but now you have to look at my pictures every day. People upload 70 million photos to Instagram every day, and that's what keeps that experience live and fresh. The idea of the transparency again, when you think about what can a bank do, Wallet AI actually can analyze your behavior, your spending behavior, to help you make better financial decisions. It's kind of like you've got that thing in the back of your head that's saying, no, don't buy that. And you're like, I'm going to buy that. And it's like, no, don't buy that. But then you've got this, like, you know, actual app that can help you make that decision. It's cool. And then there's wisdom from data. CrowdMed, you can crowdsource. You can upload a photo of what's ailing you, and hundreds of doctors will look at it and give you, you know, a personalized diagnosis. And then there's obviously service from everything. We're used to the Uber example for sure. But you know, the difference between Uber and a yellow cab is you get in a yellow cab and you get out and it forgets about you forever. You get in Uber and it remembers you and it builds on, you know, your preferences, and it's trying to create a better experience for you. So brands on digital platforms are really surging ahead. I mean, Amazon is beating Walmart, Google, Netflix is way better than Comcast, Airbnb is already bigger than Hyatt. Think about that. And that was like in what, 7 years, bigger than Hyatt that we've known all of our lives. The fourth thing that we need to think about, which is really the one that's probably nearest and dearest to my heart, is this idea of experience artistry. The little things matter a great deal. So how can we experience design or create experience design that can delight all of our senses? It's really great that, you know, my Nest is connected to my GPS, and when I'm on my way home, It actually knows when to turn on the heat so that when I get in my house, it's nice and toasty. The cool thing too, though, is that product is fun to touch. It's fun to look at. It's beautiful. On the hearing side, Moodbox can play your favorite track when it stresses that when it can hear stress in your voice, which I'm sure it would be playing over and over right now for me. And then this is kind of fun. McDonald's has this create your taste kiosk now, where you can actually, put in and customize flavors. And then on the smell side, this is a cool thing that Millward Brown just did. They took 2 identical Nike sneakers and they put them in 2 identical rooms, only they scented one room with some floral scent. And then they took people through the rooms, and 84% of the people preferred the scented room. And not only did they prefer the scented room, they said that the sneaker in the scented room would be $10.23 more than the sneaker in the unscented room. So that's a small thing, but if you're not utilizing it and thinking about scent as one of those powerful things that can connect emotionally, you should be thinking about it. And lastly, we need to actually think about a culture of relentless problem solving. Curiosity, we know, leads to discovery. So how can we make everyday problems inspire magical solutions? Someday, and I'm thinking of Sue now, so Sue brought an entire separate piece of luggage with just shoes. Someday in the future, she'll just order up a MakerBot printer to her room at the hotel, and she'll say, I want this pair of shoes, and she'll be able to print it out, and she won't have to worry about carrying those shoes around anymore. That will be a great day. I think Apple, they're working on, yes, obsolescence, but I love the fact that this earbud doesn't get tangled anymore and you can just have it and it's a simple thing. It's a small problem, but it's a beautiful execution. I'm waiting for the little thing that they can just put in my ear and I don't have to worry about it ever again. But a really cool story is this story about Disney's Magic Band. I'm going to just talk about that one a little bit. So Disney was trying to actually think of how they could reduce wait time in their park. And they had put some money into, think about this, and they came up with this idea of this Magic Band. But the Magic Band cost $35 to make versus the 4 cents of the paper ticket. And I don't know about you, but most companies that I work for would say, let's just scrap that. That's just too expensive. There's no way we're going to, spend $35 on people versus the, 4 cents. But Disney didn't do that. They actually invested another $1 billion into thinking about how they could make this Magic Band work for their benefit. And they were able to actually connect over 100 different systems, and literally within, the last year, they've got these things in the park. People are actually spending up to $2 million per park more a day, and they're reporting that their experience is better as well, more likely to recommend it and more likely to return. So these are the tools that we think we need: extraordinary sensing, expansive, ambitious purpose. But there are also things that we as designers, I think, are really qualified to bring to the table on this side. So around extraordinary sensing, we need to just remember that we need to stay curious about the world. We can't just stop. We always have to be thinking ahead. We're the people that actually naturally do this, and we have to keep pushing. Expansive, ambitious purpose is about starting with the bigger problem. The challenge I think that designers have, and oftentimes I see this even in our own studio, is we define the problem too small, right? We need to continue to step back from the problems, look at what the bigger opportunities might be before we actually make a decision and move forward. And then there's digital design. I'm not really a digital designer, and technology does sometimes frighten me. But I think what I've seen about digital design is the point is to make it invisible, right? What are all the new things it can do? So we just need to learn to break the rules and think about how can we use this technology and how can our clients potentially use this technology, to move them forward and to allow them to grow. And then experience artistry, remembering to sweat all of the small stuff, look at all 5 senses, have you explored every option, because those are the little things, and even sometimes the littlest thing can make the biggest difference. And then the culture of relentless problem solving. We really need to just continue to seek the better way. So the world isn't slowing down. It's not stopping for anyone. I think we're all just learning kind of right now to get our footing in this really enormous time of change. But just think about this. Since I started this talk and since I went over a little bit, it's probably more than this, 7,000 new people entered the earth. And they're going to be here for the next 100 years with all its massive change and endless possibilities. So for them and for us, it's only the beginning. Thank you.
You just brought back the theme that you started with about living to 100. So if we are living to 100, if today's youth are able to live to 100.
Start saving now. Oh.
Start
saving now.
What does that mean about our life choices? Do you think that will change, for example, when people get married?
Yeah.
Or when they want to have children? How do you see that changing?
I can imagine almost everything will change. I mean, everything has continued to change. I mean, I still think people will get married and they'll still have
But will they get married
children
at 27 or
yeah,
will they get married at 40?
Very interesting to think about that. The one thing we do know is that on average, people are probably going to have about 5 jobs, right? They're not going to actually be working for anybody the way we work for people today. Like, I'm an abnormality. I've worked for the same company for almost 28 years now.
That's amazing. That's an accomplishment.
I get it. I'm afraid of change. What can I tell you?
That's never going to change.
Yeah, but so how we make choices about everything is going to be different. Where are we going to get our insurance, and how are we going to live our lives? It's going to be a very different, very interconnected time. Exciting, but I think we're just at the precipice of this. So
you talked about one of the fears in the trends that you were showing about transparency, and I think that we are all aware now that if we are in an Uber or if we are going through a toll with an Easy Pass, that our steps are being tracked. We're not only tracking them with Fitbits and Apple Watches, we're also having them tracked by all of the engagement that we have with technology in the world. Yeah. I think that we as a culture have been willing to do this for one reason, and that's convenience. In the same way that you were talking about the Disney Magic Watch or Magic Band. Yeah. How do you see us being able to balance our need for privacy with a need for convenience? Or are we willing to give up our privacy in the future?
Well, I think it kind of depends, again, on who you are. So we do know from the studies that we've done that younger people don't care as much about this. They're used to sharing. It doesn't bother them. People in the baby boom, depending on sort of the type of work they do or just where they live in the country, may have different feelings about it. But I think that it's always going to be a question until we get past it, until we see a lot of the successes that come from this sharing. I mean, there's so many potential things that can happen for good, right? I mean, the fact that we might be able to, cure cancer and get that data that allows us to, be able to do those things, or, even just get rid of diabetes. And, for me, for some reason, that side of what the transparency is going to allow us sort of makes up for the fact that I'm giving away some of the things that I might not normally want to.
Thank you, Connie. Connie Birdsall from Lippincott.